Find out more and head on over to supertalktv.com. You'll see I have with me in the studio Sherri and Charlie Marengo. They're here to talk about their latest book, which is 12 Years After 7 Months to Live. It's a love story, and they are celebrating their 41st wedding anniversary. So happy anniversary, guys.
Thank you.
I think of all the years, 5 years of good things, 1,000 shows, whatever later, I don't know if I've ever had an actual anniversary on the program yet. So y'all are my first.
Wow. Well, I guess it was just a matter of timing. It just kind of worked out that way.
Well, I appreciate
calendar-wise,
Yeah, I appreciate you spending your anniversary with us. Okay, so 41 years ago, Sherri and Charlie, how did the universe collide? Well, that would have been your wedding date, so I guess a little bit, not too far in front of that. How did you guys meet?
Okay.
Are you going to tell it, or you want me to tell it?
I was a bread man, and I walked into the grocery store with a rack, and I almost knocked her down with it. And next thing you know, she says, well, you might want to watch what you're doing with that thing. And I said, well, if you stand there long enough, I'll probably run right over you. Of course, I didn't have a good way with words. And next thing you know, I'm asking the lady behind the counter, I said, who is that person? She says, well, that's so-and-so. And I was like, well, I want to figure out how in the world to get her name and phone number.
And the rest was
I was working for a little AM radio station at that time and doing a live broadcast from a grocery store for Valentine's Day. And so
the story gets sweeter.
Yeah, but it wasn't very sweet because I was actually doing that because I had just broke up with somebody and I actually put it in the paper in the personal ads. I love you, but I don't love you. It was one of those, and it came out on Valentine's Day. So I was doing the remote, and he was in the store, and then I threw something up on a shelf that I couldn't reach, and him being 6'4" could reach. And then we didn't know each other at all, but I knew when I saw him, I just knew. And so I stuck a little purple sticky note on the steering wheel of his bread truck with my name and phone number. And then he waited 2 weeks to contact me. And by that time, I was thinking, he just does not have a clue. But then it was 5 months later, we got married.
So 5 months later, you got married, and that would have been on, what, July 7th?
7/7, yeah.
7/7. And 41 years later, and man, you guys have a love story that is so inspiring. It's a faith walk, and it all comes down to, in the pages of 12 years after 7 months to live, which obviously if you stick around with each other for 4 decades, there's going to be some bumps in the road, there's going to be some trials and tribulations, but it feels like you guys really have been put through the test over the last several times. So I want to go back to 2008 because that's really where, with the book, that's kind of where your roadblock or one of your road bumps started. And so who wants to set the stage for what was going on with you all in 2008?
We were in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and our first grandchild was being born. And all I got to say is that she was taking her dear sweet time, putting my daughter through it. And on the way home, I just didn't feel right. The road felt like it was moving around in front of me, even though it was still, we were driving in a vehicle. And if you actually look on a horizon and you see things moving left and right and side to side and wobbly, then something's not right. So we got as far south from Clarksdale all the way to Vicksburg. And I told Sherri, I said, I just got to pull over. Got a massive headache and I can't stand it. And I'd been having some issues prior to that, but didn't really pick up on any of it. None of it was as bad as it had become that day.
Hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah. So she drove the rest of the way home, and it was one of those days where my daughter says, I always relive December 5th, 2008. My first child was born, and my dad was diagnosed with a brain tumor. That's not the kind of anniversary that you want to remember or the kind of events that you want to relive, but it definitely has left an imprint on her life. Interestingly enough, the next day after we got home, I went to work just like I always do. And
like a man will do.
Hey.
The bread has to be delivered.
Oh, at that time he was doing car sales at that time.
Yeah, I was in the automobile business, and the walk from the parking lot to my office was somewhere in the neighborhood, probably about 100 yards. And I'd made it multiple times and felt quite fine. But that morning I got to my desk and I said, my God, I feel like I'm dying. Little would I thought I was probably speaking the truth. And I left and drove myself to the hospital, and I walked in the door, and the doctor says, what are you doing here? I said, well, something's wrong. I think I'm dying. My head is hurting me. It won't quit hurting. I've never seen anything move so fast in my life. Next thing you know, they're doing a CT scan, and he comes back and he says, you got a brain tumor. I don't remember the next 3 days. All I know is I woke up by the 9th of December, had this turban on my head, and I felt like $1 million.
He looked really good, too. He looked like, had a tan. He looked healthy. He was smiling. He was talking. I was like, the healthiest sick guy you've ever seen in your life after having a brain tumor the size of a lemon taken out of your right frontal lobe.
Sherri, being the wife driving back after the birth of your granddaughter and he having that, I guess, that incident where not being able to see her pull over, I mean, did you encourage him to go to the doctor at all, or was it kind of...
The whole time, well, it's like you said, we were in the hospital at Clarksdale because his daughter was in labor for such a long time that we were there with our other granddaughter, and we were basically just sitting on the floor in the hallway just waiting like everybody else was. And every time a doctor would come by, I'd say, why don't you ask him to take a look and see what's going on, because he had this headache that was like a sinus headache plus a migraine on steroids. It was just so horrendous that I don't even know why he even got behind the wheel to leave that day. But it was just really, really bad. And so by the time we got to Vicksburg and he couldn't see at all at that point, things were just ridiculously not moving. Then I don't even know why he didn't go to the doctor that night. But he went Monday morning, and we're very fortunate in all of this that we've always had doctors that we were friends with that just magically appeared in our path while all of this was going on.
And this is in home in Hattiesburg?
Yeah, this is in Hattiesburg at Force General. We've been very, very well treated and taken care of. I mean, he's had excellent care. But that was the scariest time for us because we had a kid in high school and we had a kid in elementary school at the same time. And so when he was diagnosed, and really we just had no clue that was coming. We were like, it's another headache. I mean, we were all there, blowing up balloons. Well, okay, there were gloves. And my ex-husband was there in the room with us and everything. When that diagnosis came down, we did not see that coming.
So you thought that you had the tumor, and you mentioned, Charlie, that you felt great after it was removed. I mean, a lemon-sized tumor in your head, I'd have to think that you've been living with some kind of pressure or discomfort or something for so long, or maybe you just got so used to feeling uncomfortable, you don't remember what normal felt like. So for you, you felt relief now that it was just gone, and you thought it was over.
And that's brilliant. That is exactly the way it was. I'd gotten so accustomed to actually sitting down at my desk and feeling things just kind of uneasy and felt just a pressure. I thought it was my blood pressure because, well, that's what a lot of guys think due to a 100-yard walk. And the turning point for us was when our doctor came in on the 10th, 5 days after the surgery was done, and the pathology comes back. When you have something removed, you really don't know what it is until the pathology comes back. And when the pathology arrives, you've never heard the word before. And next thing you know, I can tell by his posture and his walk and the way he sits down, it isn't good. And he has that look on his face that says it isn't good. Have you ever been to the Grand Canyon?
Me? No.
No, that was the question the doctor asked.
I was like, I was supposed to run a race once there, but I got pregnant and I couldn't do it.
I was thinking, when I think of the Grand Canyon, I'm sorry, I always think of Chevy Chase. But when somebody says, like the movie Bucket List, when they say, this is your bucket list, your top 10 things you've always wanted to do.
Got it. He was encouraging him to go.
And when he said that, I was like, what does this even?
That's
why?
me. Like, why? Okay.
Why?
What a way to lead with.
And then
your expression just then was exactly mine at that moment. I looked at Sherri and I said, "What is he talking about?"
You ever been skydiving? I don't know. No.
Why would you jump out of a perfectly good airplane? So it was a. I think that was the way that the door opened to the diagnosis, and to the really the hard news was that nobody lives longer than 6 months to a year on a good day from a glioblastoma. And they really don't. And for him to basically say maybe 7 months on the outside, now's a good time for you to sit down with your family and get your affairs in order. You just don't see that coming.
And this was in 2008.
2008 in January. December 2008.
Well, that is obviously not where your story stops. It's where it just begins, because it's 2022, I think. For a little
last time we looked,
and you're still with us, Charlie. So we've got more with Charlie and Sherri coming up next. We're finding out more about the Marengos story. That's Charlie and Sherri. They wrote the book 12 Years After 7 Months to Live, The Faith to Fight a Terminal Brain Tumor. We were stopping in 2008, where your world kind of collided, which I guess technically it may have went into 2009 when you finally got the diagnosis and asked if you were, I'm never going to think of, have you seen the Grand Canyon the same again, Charlie?
It's such a bucket list question.
It is such a bucket list question, and I can't imagine what a family goes through. I mean, on one hand, you can get a cancer diagnosis and be told you've got years or you've got however much. But Charlie, what was it like whenever there was a timeline of less than 12 months put on? I mean, nobody knows when their last day is. It could come at any time. But at the same time, there's only a few folks that really know what it's like to be told, well, here's a countdown.
That's exactly right. I thought to myself, what in the world am I going to do? So many decisions to make that until you're actually thrust into that arena, you're just not capable of answering any of those things or dealing with them until you actually find yourself there. Life sometimes is like a freight train. You either get off the tracks or you let it run right over you. In this case, it was coming right at me. And I didn't want to have to depart from this world inside of 7 months. So by the time we got on the other side of 7 months, next thing you know, my oncologist is saying, well, you kind of beat the odds. I said, well, let's just keep on going.
Did you start any kind of treatment?
Yeah. January of 2009 started a chemo pill called Timidar, and also radiation therapy. Every bit of that I went through smooth, didn't have any complications from it. And when we got through with all of that, the question was, well, what do we do with him now? And I asked myself that as well. What do I do with me now? Because, let's see, if they're according to 7 months from July, from December, that would mean the month I was born, I would be leaving. And when I got on the other side of that, never mind, all I'm going to do now is look forward.
I'm curious the process that you went through, to maybe make the decision to try to treat it. Because there's a lot of people who get weighed with that option of a short time to live and living that 7 months versus trying to fight for another 7 or another 7 weeks or, whatever, and what the, side effects from the various treatments could look like. And I know that was like a family decision, but where did the courage to just say, screw it, I'm going out with a fight?
We, at the time, and I think there's one new chemotherapy treatment for glioblastoma, but at that time that was the only one. And it is, again, it's a pill. It's not like a shunt or an IV or anything like that. And so they started out on the regimen they thought would be sufficient to go to try to make sure that it was, because the tumor was gone. They didn't have any sign of any cells anywhere in there, but this was like the insurance policy to keep it at bay, because glioblastoma has a terrible, terrible history of you think you got it, and then 6 months later it's like everywhere, and it just takes over your whole brain. But after, like, when we got to year 3, we went to the doctor and said, why are we still doing this? Because it was starting to cause detrimental effects to his health. Because sometimes, especially with cancer, the treatment is just as bad, if not worse, than the actual disease itself. And we were scared to death. Let's not coat this with anything. We were scared to death. We were scared to talk about it out loud. We were scared. We were certainly afraid to talk to our kids. We had no idea what to do with getting your affairs in order when you're in. How old were you? Were you in our?
I was in my early 50s.
No. It was before that, because Hannah was.
I was 51.
Like 12. Yeah, it was right there around that 49, 50 area, which is right about the time that most couples are like, yay, let's make plans for the future to, we got this many more years before we can retire. Let's make a plan. This time it was, let's make a plan for, how to take care of the house, how to take care of the cars. What about the kids and their education and insurance? And, and we were taking care of parents at the same time. So we were not just dealing with him, but we were dealing with a lot of other things, a lot of moving parts. And in the book, we explain a lot of that. But the point behind some of this was really because we learned a lot of things the hard way. We learned a lot of language about cancer that we had never had to face before. I mean, honestly, not had to personally put our hands on words that we didn't want to learn.
What were some of those? Assuming they're not dirty words.
No, we know all those. It was like, it was like we were not used to like hearing. We had not gone down the whole MRI, PET scans, and
all the acronyms,
all of the initials. It was like an alphabet soup of scary.
They don't give
us.
you a flip chart, or they don't give you note
You don't get a
cards.
manual because everybody is different. But that was why we kind of wrote most of what we wrote in the book. Was we wanted to be very upfront and raw about all of the things that we went through, and it is very raw. One actual entire chapter is basically I went through the house and pulled all of our journals. We journal like crazy people, everything all the time, and so I found every journal in the house of every page that we had ever written during this time, and I scanned them and I tried to make sense of that.
My handwriting.
Yeah, because his handwriting went from not great to really not great. But it's where we were at the time, and it's hurtful and it's painful to go back and see it. And I know our kids are really struggling with that.
But it's the truth.
It is. It's very much.
And it
but
can be
maybe
healing.
Some people can read this and go, this is exactly where I'm at, or this is exactly how I'm feeling, or, I have somebody that's going through this, and they need to read your story because they have lost all hope.
Which I think is the crux of what your story is the fact that you never gave up faith to fight.
No.
The fact that you even chose to fight in the beginning, to me, is a miracle, because I know, and with no disrespect to anyone who would have chose just to go to the Grand Canyon.
Right.
And just to, live out the 7
Well,
months.
I still want to.
Well, I was going to ask, did you do, but you were also taking your treatments. Did you make steps to finalize, other than the loose ends? Did you get to go on any trips? Did you eat any good cheesecake? I mean, it's those kind of things.
No, I had a job.
Yeah.
I had a job. I had a morning show on the radio. So, for 5 hours a day, I could put all of this aside for those 5 hours. And then he was at home as half the time he drove himself to treatment, and we had a kid in school. And that Hannah was, let's see, in 2008, I don't know.
12.
At one point, somewhere around her birthday or January, February, and when all of this was going on, she went and goes, "Did we have Christmas?" And I was like, "I think we might have, but I can't guarantee it. Let's go look at some pictures and see if we did." Because we honestly, the whole month of December is just a big old fog.
Right.
You asked the question earlier about what gave you the courage to go forward. Mm-hmm. Well, unknown to me at the time, I sold thousands of cars to people, okay? Well,
3 on our C-Spire text line.
Probably way more than that.
And ironically, I had no idea how many people actually thought enough of me to actually send me cards from their churches and say, "Hey, we're praying for you."
All over the world.
Really? I don't mind telling you right now, it chokes me up when I think about it, because you don't realize how other people care for you until they actually know that something's wrong with you. And yeah, you're praying for yourself and you're asking God a whole lot of questions and you're asking everybody around you a whole lot of questions. But ultimately, it all comes down to your friends, your family, and your faith. My faith was, let's just say, there, but you don't know where your faith really is until you finally stare yourself in the mirror and see the time clicking by, and the clock won't stop ticking. You can't buy back time. It's never going to stop until that day when you're not here anymore. And when you realize when you stare your mortality in the face, you find that next step that moves you forward and keeps you going.
You also remind us, Charlie, though, that there is somebody on the other side of those cards. And when we're in our small groups or at our churches and we see the prayer list and someone raises their hand and says, Charlie has cancer, let's keep him in our prayer. You may be going through the motions just being a part of that church congregation, but at the same time, there's somebody who cares that you care on the other side. And so that's going to make me choked up. But I think sometimes we forget the power of just honoring someone and holding space for them through prayer or just community connection. And we don't recognize how much that can actually be part of what helps them heal or helps them just go one more day.
I have to I have to give a plug real quick to my oncologist. I wished all doctors had an opportunity to spend a day with an oncologist who deals with people who are terminal all the time. Not to be negative or anything, but there's a difference. And oncologists deal with people who are dying. And they put their hand on their shoulder, they talk to them, they spend more time with them, they invest in them, and they encourage them before they ever leave. And mine was at the top of my list. She's an angel, and she has a place waiting for her.
What's her name?
Dr. Lisa Bond.
Dr.
Exactly.
Lisa Bond. We're going to get into the faith side of Charlie and Sherri's story coming up next. And I hope you're joining us, too, over at SuperTalkTV.com. You'll see we're continuing our conversation with Sherri and Charlie Marengo. They're from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And, man, they've been married 41 years today. Woo-hoo. But, man, they've walked through some trials and tribulations along the way, one being the fact that in 2008, you were diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor. And then the fight began, right? I mean, we're now 12 years later, so there's light at the end of the tunnel. But that was a rough sort of period of time. And Charlie, you didn't read the book until the book came out, which I appreciate. I'm like, what a man, even though you contributed, obviously. What did you learn when you first read the 12 years after a 7 months to live?
Well, I couldn't put it down. And when I got to the section that actually Sherri contributes her part about being the caregiver, it suddenly dawned on me that when you are the person that's diagnosed, you're staring yourself in the mirror all the time, and what the person that you don't see is the person on the other side of the mirror, which is her, the caregiver. So I immediately, when I finally got through with all that, I just broke down. I was like, wow, I never knew that all of these things were a part of her life day in and day out. And for what it's worth, I'm not rambling here, okay, but for what it's worth, I work at a hospital in Hattiesburg, and I see folks all the time out on the parking lot. I watched someone one day scream and holler and beat a steering wheel, and I thought to myself, why in the world is that person doing that? And after reading this, now I know.
Because when you're in the thick of it, Sherri, you're not trying to unload your issues onto the man who's got the brain tumor. I mean, that seems a little... But at the same time, you may be tough, but you're not bulletproof.
That is true. And there's a whole, once we get past all of the trauma and the drama and everything that went on, because it wasn't, I mean, there was the brain tumor and then there was the healing. And we truthfully believe that that was a divine healing, because otherwise, why is he here 14 years later and people are still like, I mean, even doctors will look at him and go, but we don't know what to do with you. We don't understand. We don't get it. And I'm like, you don't have to get it, because we do. We totally 100% in our people in our circle all understand this, that he's here because God said he needed him here to do things, to be the messenger, to be in the ministry that he's in. As he drives the shuttle in a parking lot, he is exactly where he needs to be and doing what he needs to do. With caregivers, I do want to make sure that you know that in this book there's like a whole chapter of information about don't do what I did, which was I just kept it all to myself, because I had a job, I had a kid, I had another kid, I had a sick dad, I had a husband in chemo, and was just basically trying to survive. And also we had a daughter that was in and out of jail and hospital at the same time on a different floor. So it was crazy there for a couple of years, but you need to have somebody that you can unload with. You need to have somebody you can scream with, or just somebody that's just going to sit there and let you just fall on the floor and get it all out. And it doesn't always need to be somebody from your Sunday school class, because sometimes they'll look back at you and go, that was kind of weird. But it is important that caregivers have an outlet and that they have a support system of some kind, not familiar, not related, not inside your house. And you can't do that with your person when they're sitting there with that poison in their body. You have to step away from them, because they're just going to get even more freaked out. So it's good that you have, even if it's a friend that lives a town away or something, you can just call and say, I need to come to your house. And I did that with a couple of people. I just said, I'm coming to your house. Please make your kids and your dog go outside, because I'm fixing to unload. And I just walk in, she hand me a cup of coffee, shut the door, and I just let it go. But, everybody needs that. Also, there's a lot of resources that we put in the book that people, a lot of what we're dealing with right now is we're counseling with some people when they get diagnosed with a brain tumor like that. or a family member. We get calls and texts all the time from people that are like, I have a friend that just got diagnosed and they're freaking out and they don't know what to do or who to talk to. Well, you're in total shock for the first week. Why? You're in shock for a while. So it's best if you don't make any decisions right then. It's best that you don't knee-jerk into, oh my God, I got to sell the house and, I got to go and pay off the car. Don't do anything for a little while. Just let it happen, because a couple of days is not going to make any big difference.
You were talking about, Sherri, one thing that got you through is this idea of just for today.
Yeah.
Or one day at a time. And then you don't really understand it until your anxiety is so heavy that it's all you can do.
Mm-hmm. It is.
What that can mean for someone. It can be the best piece of advice and no matter where you are, maybe in a journey now that's hard. I like Mike from Grand Bay chimes in and says, we need to start the 3F Club, faith, family, and friends.
That's
Bring
one
it
big,
on.
that's actually the name of one of the chapters in the book. Yeah. And of course, then we added the fight on top of that. But again, there are some really good resources. There is a lot more information now that is of a more positive light than there was, because when we started this business back in 2008, 2009, still the internet was very young then, and we were just searching, and all you got was terrible bad things, and you can't live in that terrible bad place. You have to come out of that and look at the bigger picture. But again, just for today, just get through today.
Just get for today. Mike from Mike in Gulfport, the name of the book is 12 Years After 7 Months to Live, The Faith to Fight a Terminal Brain Tumor. Charlie and Sherri Marengo as the authors, if you want to look it up. Speaking of the book, where can we get it?
Amazon.com is the quickest, easiest way to get it. We are doing a book signing at the Author Shop in downtown Hattiesburg next Saturday the 16th. We will be at Sumrall at the Except for Grace Christian Bookstore on August the 6th, and we are speaking at churches. So if anybody wants us to come and speak to their small group or to their church on Wednesday night, we basically work for food and gas money at this point, because we just want to be able to bring the message to people he's a walking, talking miracle, and people need to be able to put their eyes on that and not just listen to what we say, but to see that he's here, he's fine. He's the healthiest sick guy you've ever seen in your life.
You can't see through the radio what that look that she just gave me.
Yeah.
Yes, well, I'm fine.
It's one thing to be the loved one, Sherri, to be the wife of 41 years and have prayed, feel like your prayers are answered. I feel like it's another perspective to be the one that feels like you cheated death, right? I was just listening to a podcast of one of the survivors from the plane that went down and got landed. Sully was the captain's name. I can't remember what it was. And how he felt like he got a second chance at life when he opened his eyes and he saw that they were floating and he wasn't, dead. So for you, when you passed that 7 month and now you're at 14 years, how do you grapple with that?
The book. Actually, the book. And the reason I say that is because for the longest I thought to myself, okay, what's next? I've already overcome. And what's also mentioned in here is that we didn't talk about is in 2019 I had a recurrence. I've always said...
Technically not, but...
Well, okay, but they took out a brain tumor. I've always said that most people fail to comprehend that just because God gives you a second chance and heals you of something doesn't mean that you're not going to have something else happen later on. Even Lazarus died again.
That is true.
He didn't get raised the second time.
That's true. That is true.
So my overall...
Cats only have 9 lives.
That's go. Right.
And I may be on my 8th or 9th, I don't know, but...
He's had some times.
Ultimately, the positive component of this is the equivalent of what my brother and I have discussed so many times. It's not like if you die and you show up in heaven, God goes, "What are you doing here?"
I don't know. I know some people that's probably going to be what they get. So,
but you are correct. Yes, and that's just going with it's the idea that God's already there, or that there's no surprises for God. There may be surprises for us. Again, going back to 2008, it blew you away to hear that kind of diagnosis. But the way that you two have managed to do it together, to me, is beautiful, because sometimes things like that tear families apart. They don't necessarily knit them tighter together.
It does. And that's sad, because it's because everybody's living in their own little part of the trauma of a disease that is literally trying to kill you. I mean, cancer is of Satan. It's just here to kill you. That's all it is. There's no positive to this at all. So we've decided to take a verse that is basically going to be our verse to cover this book in our journey. And there is going to be a second companion book, by the way, called the Survivor Sessions. So if anybody wants that for a small group, for a church, there's a contact information in the back. But it is 1 Peter 5:10, and after you've suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. To him be the dominion forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Well, that is a beautiful place to wrap this up with, but we will stick with Sherri and Charlie coming up next here on Good Things. Also, take some time to go over to supertalktv.com, and if you're just joining us, you want to go back and find Good Things later on YouTube or even in podcast form, because Sherri and Charlie have shared a wonderful story. It's a story of love. It's a story of fight. It's a story of surrender. It's just a great story full of hope as well. And their book, 12 Years After 7 Months to Live, it's the faith to fight a terminal brain tumor, is what we're talking about today here on Good Things. And I thought we would end with kind of pointing out the obvious, because I know you guys also direct that into the book. It's because you are a miracle, Charlie. You were given 7 months to live, and you beat that. 14 years later, you're here with us, doing well, and have gotten to experience so much life. And I feel like there's going to be someone listening who says, yeah, but we had all the prayer cards. We were also on all the prayer circles. We, believed for more. And unfortunately, someone's time with cancer came to an end before they determined it was, fair. How do you wrestle with that when you come across people with stories like that as well?
Again, I go back to the discussion that I had with my brother. We deal with death in the book. And he and I talk about this oftentimes more than anything else, and the reason being is because his wife died 2 years ago. She had a terminal tongue cancer problem, and the doctor told her that you won't die from the tongue cancer, you're going to die from the effects of it. He watched her for the last 8 years of her life come down to where the only relief that she would ever get in this life was to leave here. Now, as hard as that is to swallow, I've been there, done that, and thought to myself out in my backyard when I didn't know whether the sky was up or down, or whether or not I was looking to be put 10 feet in the ground or whatever. I asked myself the same question: is it my time? And if it is my time, then who am I to actually say that I could stop it? And if I've been given the opportunity and the blessing to actually stay here, then I need to contribute something to help people. The most important thing that you can do day in and day out for somebody is make a difference in at least one person's life.
Well, and you're going to get healed either here or there. You're either going to be healed here on earth in this life, or you're going to be healed when you walk into heaven. And then the battle's over. You've got where you got to go. And we have got a couple of people's stories. It's not just us in the book. We had a couple of people that contributed their family stories of their people that did not survive glioblastoma brain tumors. And it doesn't always have this outcome. And it doesn't always, no matter how you pray and no matter what treatments you get and no matter how much you love somebody, that does not always keep them from dying and being healed in heaven.
It would have been very unfair for us to not create a balance in this book.
Yeah,
and I think
we want people to understand that.
But I think the thread through, no matter what the story is, if there's a cancer story or there's a battle story, it's still having hope.
There is hope, and there's a lot of encouragement. And that was part of the reason we wrote the book, was we just wanted other people to have a little bit more information and a little bit more introspective about what they're going to face because of what we had to go through. We learned things the hard way, so we want to be able to tell other people, and that's why we talk to so many people and counsel with people, is because we had to learn a bunch of things, like on the run. Just wake up and learn something new that you had to deal with you didn't have to deal with yesterday.
Isn't that interesting? I was telling somebody yesterday, I said, it's not like I woke up one morning and said, I think I'm going to go see if I got cancer.
Nope.
Nobody does. Rebecca, you can break a leg and you don't think you're going to die. You can have a severe cut and you don't think you're going to die. You may act like it, but when you hear the C word, that has a whole different connotation. It makes that person, when they hear the word, think, oh, dear God, I'm going to die.
And that's exactly, when you hear the word cancer, you immediately That feels like a death sentence the minute that you hear that. But it isn't always that way.
No, and I think that's the beauty of the story, too, and just the fact that you had the courage to fight. You had the faith to, keep going. And then, too, now you have this opportunity to sort of pay it forward. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it's a love story as well, as you celebrate your 41st wedding anniversary. You didn't know that day you were delivering bread. You would meet your soon-to-be bride 5 months later, which I think such, again, small world. Shout out to Andy, who was the manager at the Sunflower when you guys met 41 years ago. When they say Mississippi really is a small town, we really are one big... small town sort of family, and I feel like you guys are going to help a lot of families with your story of hope, and just knowing that someone has walked through the unthinkable, and there are even if it's not your story that may end in it, just knowing that there can be a positive outcome for somebody, maybe all that someone needs today.
We do have a Facebook page for 12 Years After 7 Months to Live. So if anybody wants to go to Facebook and just like that page, they can send us a message or drop a name and a contact info. And then also Charlie's email address is in all the books. But, I mean, we want people to come to us with their questions and their stories. And if they want us to come to them, we're glad to do that.
All right. Y'all got to come back for your 50th wedding anniversary.
You bet.
Okay? We'll celebrate that here on Good
I'll
Things.
push him in his wheelchair.
All right, y'all stick with us, though. We got shifting gears, absolutely, to Sports Talk Mississippi from 3 to 6. Rhino and I will meet you back here tomorrow at 2. But until then, I hope you all find time for the good things.